When I saw the Apple Keynote and first saw the iPad Air and the 4th generation, I was like, okay, I probably just need to send in my iPad Air 1st generation to Apple, do the whole recycle thing and just get the iPad Air because it's absolutely a no-brainer. Has a modern chip, even better than the iPad Pro. And I was like, I need this because it's just so much better. And I was a little bit worried why Apple is just using the iPad Air to kill the iPad Pro 11-inch edition in the 2020. In this whole video, I just want to discuss if this is really the case, if you really need to go for the iPad Air. Is this really the no-brainer, or is there still a reason to go for the iPad Pro? So I just made this video with a whole comparison with all the similarities and all the differences of these two products and which should you pick for which reason. So let's get started right after the intro. Here we go, and welcome to the Idea of Technology. My name is Michael, and today it's all about the differences between the iPad Air in the 4th generation and the iPad Pro 11-inch in the 2nd generation, both in 2020, and which one should you pick for which reason. So let's just get started with all the similarities. I have 10 for you where they're just really similar, and I have just 8 different items or 8 different specs where they're so different. I really need to make a point there. So let's just get started with the similarities first, and then with all the important differences so that you can decide which iPad is just the right for you. Okay, first off, really interesting for me is that they basically have the same footprint, but that means we were talking about same height, same width, exactly off a fraction of a millimeter, which is just really interesting. On the other side, the iPad Pro is around about 0.2 millimeters thinner than the iPad Air. Really interesting, but I hope that the accessories and all the different third-party solutions you can get for the iPad Pro 11-inch also just fits for the iPad Air. Would be perfect, and I hope and I think that the accessories could basically be the same. And the other part, which is also really important for me, is that finally the iPad Air is also coming with USB Type-C. So another similarity, you can attach your monitor, SSDs, and all the other accessories you just want for your iPad. And these are probably one of the two biggest similarities. The third point is also interesting. I will talk about this in a minute or so when we talk about the differences. Is basically we have the same screen size of 11-inch. Okay, we talk about 11-inch on the iPad Pro and 10.9 inches on the iPad Air, but basically they have the same pixel or not this way around, pixel per inch, PPI, okay, the same PPI of 264, so basically same resolution, same super crisp Retina display. On the other side, what's also similar is that they both just coming with LTE, so the iPad Air can be equipped with it and also the iPad Pro, but no 5G like Apple was just talking about 50 times or so with the iPhone, that is just coming in for different flavors, but no 5G on the iPad and just similar LTE like on the iPad Pro and the iPad Air. And more on the accessory side from Apple themselves is really cool part that the iPad Air, like the iPad Pro, is just compatible with the Apple Pencil Generation 2, which is really important in my opinion. So no more supporting the 1st generation. So now you can just wirelessly attach your Apple Pencil there and also can just charge it. The charging solution from the 1st generation was a little bit strange, like charging the Magic Mouse or something like this. But it was just pretty cool that they are now supporting this as well, as also they supporting the Magic Keyboard or the Folio or how they just call it nowadays. So also the iPad Pro and the iPad Air are just compatible with the Folio and all the accessories from Apple themselves, which is just pretty good. Point number 7 that is also similar is just the battery life, like the standard iPad battery life, you could say. So they are both coming with 10 hours, which is just totally fine. You really get used to it that Apple is just able to deliver these 10 hours on both devices, totally fine. And which is also really important for me is because I've already upgraded my network here at home and in my studio. Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5 on both devices is also the same, so you're really future-proof when it comes to this point. Point number 9, where they're also similar, are the main shooters. So the main rear camera, the 12 megapixel wide angle camera, are also the same like this basic camera you just get on every iPhone and now on nearly every iPad, you could say so. Basically, this is the same. The complete camera setup on the iPad Pro is a completely different story, so we'll talk about this in a different section in a minute. But basically, the main shooter is the same, and even the front camera is also the same, despite this whole Face ID thing. Also, a little difference on the iPad Pro I'm also covering in a second. And the last but not least part are the reason number 10 or point number 10 are the colors. That means you get on the Pro model and on the iPad Air the basic colors from Apple, like silver and space gray. The iPad Air has some different colors as well, like rose gold, blue and green. Also a little difference I just also cover in a minute. But these are all the similarities between these two devices, which are also pretty important points, but the differences are also the reason why I just want to make this video here, and we just need to go in deeper to see what is the reason Apple is choosing the one difference over the other, and what does this mean for you when you just want to buy an iPad. Okay, so now we are coming to the interesting part of this video, the differences. And I have 8 differences for you that are also really important in my opinion. And the very first one is the reason why you buy an iPad and why you have a tablet is the display itself. And there are a couple of differences in the display technology between the iPad Air and the iPad Pro we really need to discuss in this section here. The first point is probably not the most important thing. As I mentioned before, the iPad Pro comes in 11 inches and the iPad Air comes in 10.9 inches, and they both have the same length and width. That means the Pro has just somehow a little bit slimmer bezels than the iPad Air. I think you will only see it if you just compare side by side. That means that the iPad Pro has just 28 by 28 pixels more. At the end, the pixel density is the same, but they have just 28 pixels by 28 pixels more on the display. Not this important. More important is the fact that the iPad Pro comes with 600 nits brightness and the iPad Air just comes with 500 nits. 500 nits is just still really bright, but when you're really outside, there is definitely a difference when you just compare 600 to 500 nits. So you will basically see the image better and brighter on the iPad Pro. And if this is important for you, you could just basically decide that you probably need to go for the iPad Pro at this point. And the third part on the whole display section here is ProMotion. That means on the iPad Pros it's now common that you have a ProMotion, a high refresh rate display up to 120 Hz, which is just super smooth and it feels more snappy and really cool. On the other side, the iPad Air, just like the iPhones, are now sticking with 60 Hz at this moment. That means no ProMotion for the iPad Air display at this point. And there you will have just a really big difference. You need to figure out for yourself if this is important for you. If you want to have the highest refresh rate, a super smooth, go for the iPad Pro. And if this is not the most important part for you, and you just basically just stucking like you're watching this video here with 60 Hz, just go for the iPad Air. The second difference, also really important, is the speaker system. Or if speakers are not this important for you and you're always just using headphones, it's probably not this important. But if you're really watching videos, YouTube or whatever, or just listening to music, there is a difference that the iPad Air is now coming with 2 speakers, which is just way better than my iPad Air first gen. It has just down-firing speaker at the lightning port, which was just horrible to listen to and you're always just covering it in landscape mode. Now the iPad Air is coming with a dual speaker system, but it's only supporting stereo sound when you have it in landscape mode. So if you have it holding it vertical, there is no stereo sound. On the other side, the iPad Pro, like the first gen iPad Pro, comes with 4 speakers, which is just really insane in this small form factor. And the camera setup is somehow similar to the previous point, because it heavily depends how you use it, because you can totally live with your iPad and not use your camera system at all. I don't know so many people that are shooting videos or photos with your iPad. You probably now can. Back in the days it was just horrible, but now you have just 4K 60 FPS on the main shooter on the iPad Air, and it's just perfectly fine. You can even just shoot really good smart HDR photos if you want to. And also the front camera is just okay for video recording, Zoom calls or whatever you want to do at this point. On the other side, the iPad Pro also comes with a super wide angle lens, this 10 megapixel lens, if this is important for you, as well as LiDAR. So if you're using this LiDAR sensor really for orientation in a room, augmented reality, and maybe also just more focus in darker scenarios. And furthermore, point number 4 is Also camera related, because on the iPad Air you just get TouchID, and a lot of people were just hoping for a TouchID button on the back or in the display for the iPhones, but it doesn't happen. So a lot of people were just let down and only just sticking with Face ID on their iPhone, especially in COVID-19 times. On the other side, the iPad Pro just comes with Face ID, so way more advanced, true depth camera, whatever. So really cool stuff in the iPad Pro. And I must be honest, when I'm thinking about the use case for an iPad, I would probably just use it inside, and most of the time I'm alone inside using my iPad and I don't wear a mask. That means Face ID would be for me better for a device I'm using inside. So I think I would personally like to have the iPad Pro Face ID, but on the iPad Air it's just now Touch ID, so you really need to decide what's better for you, but I have my own meaning and decision on this side, so yeah. Point number 5 is just the storage, and when I'm just pre-ordering my iPad Air in the blue version, 64 gigs, so I hope it arrives in a couple of days, so I will absolutely do a review on this channel here. So if you just want to see the review from me here, just subscribe to this channel, would be really cool. But nevertheless, when I just ordered this device, it was like, the base configuration is just 64 gigs, which is in my opinion a little bit low. My sweet spot would be for base configuration like the iPhone Pro and like the iPad Pro's 128 gigs. This is in my opinion sweet spot for all the content, all the applications you now have nowadays, and 4K 60 FPS recording just needs a lot of data on your device. So you only have the chance to go for 64 gigs or 65 this way, 256 gigs. That means there's no in between 128, and that's a bummer for me. I would really like the 128 gigs, and you only get it on the iPad Pro, and up to 1 terabyte, which is just insane. Think about 1 terabyte in a tablet like this. There's just one not this important part, the colors. So the Pro models are just sucking with the Pro colors, you could say. So that means we're just going for silver and space gray, and on the iPad Air it's more like the lifestyle and more stylish devices. You also get rose gold, blue and green, which I really like, so I just was going for the blue model. Let's see how this works out. It's more just this pastel. And now we're coming to the elephant in the room. I was just trying to get to the end of this video, that's just the processor, and there are probably the biggest issue when we're deciding going for the iPad Air or going for the iPad Pro at this point. A lot of things are heading for the iPad Pro, as I mentioned. Okay, the price is high, but we come to this in a second. But the processor is just the newest and latest and best version with the iPad Air, the A14 versus the A12Z. And we really need to dig into this to compare these and if they are just really comparable at this point. That means the A12Z, or I just call it A12, is, in this opinion, just a processor for the more powerful devices. It's just even the processor it's coming with the developer kit to make the transition away from the on the Macs, away from the Intel processors to their own ARM-based Apple Silicon at this point. So this is just really a powerful graphic-oriented CPU at this point for big, heavy tablets at this point, or even PCs, or Macs, not PCs, that have a lot of battery capacity, a lot of power, and the ability to get rid of all this heat in this device. You really need to see the difference in the architecture. That means this processor, the A12Z, just comes with 8 cores on the CPU. That means a big little principle like always on ARM. That means 4 fast CPU cores and 4 efficient CPU cores. And on the GPU side, we have just 8 cores in total. That means this device, or this CPU is just totally made for really heavy loads, not the most efficient things you just can think of. So the A14 on the other side really needs to work also in an iPhone, which is just way smaller than an iPad, and needs to get rid of the heat and always just trying to handle all the load it's coming at. That means on this side we're talking about 6-core CPUs, so 2 cores less than the A12Z. And also you have just 6 cores, 2 of them are just the faster cores, and 4 of them are the more efficient ones. And on the GPU side, on the A14, you only have 4 cores. That just see how the differences are there. The manufacturing process is just better. So on the A12Z we're talking about 7 nanometers, and on the A14 we're talking about 5 nanometers. So it's just way smaller, more efficient, more transistors. I think nearly 2 billion transistors more on the A14, and double the performance on the neural engine. So in a lot of things the A14 will be better. Apple is not directly making benchmarks between these two, but as you can see on Reddit or on Twitter, a lot of people just claiming between 10 and 20% faster. If this is the main reason you're switching your iPad, I don't know exactly, because yeah, 20% is probably not so noticeable when you're just having some graphic intensive work to do. But you need to decide for yourself. The A14 is definitely the newer chip and the better, more advanced manufacturing process at this point. But deciding just only based on the processor is just a tough call at this point. You really need to decide on the whole specs and also on the price, which brings us perfectly to the last point. Because when I was just going for the iPad Air, I was like, okay, it's a no-brainer. It's the cheaper, 230 euros cheaper and better iPad Pro with nearly the same specs. Okay, not ProMotion and no LiDAR, and some of the other things that are also pretty cool are not in there, but basically the main things an iPad stands for are there, and $230 or 230 euros cheaper. But we really need to dig deeper. Where are the similarities and the differences at this point? That means for this money you have half the storage, which can be a big problem. And when we double up to 256 gigabytes on both models, the delta between these two are shrinking down to 190 euros. And at this point you really need to think about, okay, you're paying for FaceID, you're paying for the better camera system, ProMotion, a lot of things that are or could be really important for a prosumer or a pro who goes for an iPad Pro. And these are all things you need to consider, and I was like, maybe the iPad Pro would have been the better deal for me. But now I'm just going for the iPad Air because it's just really a budget-friendly solution. But at the moment you're just going for more storage there. The difference to the iPad Pro just really shrinks down in this moment. So I think that's just really interesting to see the real differences between these models, and also all the similarities they're now sharing. I think Apple is now pushing the whole lineup a little bit closer together on this side, leaving the low end for the iPad mini and the iPad, and bringing the iPad Air a little bit closer, or just having some really big improvements on the iPad Pro side to make the difference a little bit better at this point. But now the iPad Air is coming out. It can be really difficult as a consumer to decide which model should I buy for Christmas or for myself to get my work done, because just for consuming some content I would always go for the iPad, which is super budget friendly. It has a lot of storage, a lot of capability, enough performance, super support for a couple of years, at least 4 or even 5 years support, so no problem on this side. But when we go for the more advanced iPads there, I just want to clarify this in this video so you may be now better aware of the differences, what you need to pick because of a certain reason. And as always, if you dislike this video, you know what to do. But if you liked it, hit like down there, get subscribed, and enable the notifications with the bell icon so you won't miss any future video of the idea of technology. And I just want to say thank you very much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.